Hello, gentlemen, and welcome yet again to another episode of the Gentlemen's Club. I am your host, Mark Activator, and it's so good to be back again. Ladies and gentlemen, I had visited a distillery recently. This one was the Kirin Fuji Gotemba Distillery in East Shizuoka Prefecture. Now, this is where they make the very acclaimed Fuji Sanroku whiskey. This is currently my favorite Japanese whiskey out of the bunch because it is the best bang per buck. You may hear me say that so many times, and I will say it a lot more in the future when I conduct other reviews about Kirin whiskeys, because this is the standard to beat. This is the bar, so to speak. But anyways, I went there about 4 weeks ago, early November. It was a beautiful day. It was a nice train ride there, about an hour, 30 minutes to make it to the distillery from Tokyo. I just can't tell you how exciting it was for my very first distillery visit, and I have a lot more distillery visits lined up. I have a couple of places in mind where I would like to go next, but it's just more or less I'm waiting for the weather to get a little bit better, and I have to verify that these places are open, so to speak, because it is end of the year and a lot of businesses are closing, so I might just hold out on that. Anyways, look at these fine whiskeys I have here. These are Distiller Select, these two in the small bottles that can only be obtained from the distillery, as well as this one, the Fuji Sanroku Signature Blend. This one can only be ordered specially online or bought from the souvenir shop of the distillery. But even if you're inside the States, don't expect to try to order online because they do not ship internationally, unfortunately. And this is the one that is the standard that the rest have to live up to. That will, all of these others will be judged against. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this video started about talking about my visit to this distillery. I had left home early in the morning, and I was adamant about trying to get to this distillery by 12 o'clock. It was a beautiful sunny day. I took this special train car called the Romance Car, and it had these very nice big windows. Along the way, I passed Mount Fuji and got to get lots of glimpses of that. Unfortunately, very sad to say that during this train ride, I was expecting to see some color changing of the leaves of the trees, and I was expecting to see an ice cap on Mount Fuji, but unfortunately, it was still just a tad bit too early for the leaves to change colors, and it was a tad bit too early for the snow. But sure enough, 2 weeks after I had went there is when the leaves started changing colors, and a snow cap did appear on Mount Fuji, but you won't see that on the video, unfortunately. Oh, another thing to mention is that video is not allowed inside the distillery, but photographs are, so this is going to be more of a slideshow than video. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing I'll say is that here at this distillery, Kirin makes both malt and grain whiskeys. When you go through the tour, it consists of 8 stages, and I'll run down and explain those 8 stages while showing some clips from their website along with some of my own photos. So we are going to switch to the, I guess, a presentation view now. All right, so stage 1 is what they call the opening. You sit in the foyer and you're waiting for a tour guide attendant to walk you through the other stages. When you're sitting inside this foyer area, behind closed glass on display are some awards and trophies won by the company, and some of their whiskey line is also on display. I'm not sure on this, but I believe the tour starts about every 30 minutes. It's not just whenever somebody walks in. They like to wait a little bit to try to accumulate as much people as possible, and then I think they will walk you out on the tour roughly about every 30 minutes, I believe. And for me, the tour started, I think I arrived at 1 o'clock, so it had started at about 1:30. Stage 2 is the theater room. Kirin shows you a video inside of a theater setting here, and the comfort and the setting are both top-notch. The video's in Japanese with English subtitles at the bottom for foreign visitors, and it shows you the entire distillation process from cradle to grave for how they make their whiskey. It all starts with the mentioning of how they get their spring water by using melted snow runoff from Mount Fuji in their distillery as a source of purified water. Kirin states they believe a clean finish that is both fruity with floral notes makes the ideal whiskey. It's hard to argue that. They took equipment and techniques from Scotland and the USA, so it is foreign equipment they use to make this ideal whiskey with. They talk about their storage facility for a short bit, saying their warehouse is as tall as a 10-story building, and they also talk about what happens to the whiskey when it sits in the warehouse for a long period of time. After 10 years, only 80% of the original whiskey is left. This is due to evaporation occurring during the maturation process, when some whiskey is lost by leaving in between the staves of the cask. They say this lost whiskey goes up to heaven, and thus this lost whiskey becomes what we call the angel's share. All right, so that was stage 2. Stage 3 is fragrance. You are walked down a hallway that has these different air conditioners, so to speak, each blowing out a different fragrance that makes some parts of the whiskey. For example, the one that I remember the most was one of these 3 air conditioners blown out a caramel and maple smell that could be found inside of the Fuji Sanroku. It's a staple of the Fuji Sanroku whiskey, and it kind of, this combination of these parts individual as a whole kind of make like this vanilla smell. Stage 4 is showing the distillation. At first, I believe I saw a mash tun for malted barley, but it was undergoing maintenance at the time I toured. Regardless of the maintenance, it still looks the same, so I have a picture of that I'll put up on the screen now. And after that, I saw some blending tanks. We were also shown some pot and wash stills. This was our first real treat of the tour. This pot still is on the outside so that you can physically walk around it, and behind the glass in the production area is another wash still. Malted whiskey is distilled twice, but the first time it is distilled, it's in what is called a wash still. This is a big copper containment with a thin neck that is heated, and this one is actually bigger than a lot of others found at some other distilleries. The shape and size of a wash is very important to the flavor and taste of the whiskey. And I'll say Kirin has a very good wash because I'm very satisfied with what it is they produce overall. The alcohol and some other materials such as yeast are heated, and as it gets hot, the vapors pass through the neck and flow back down into the pot to be distilled again. The wash still is for getting out the solid parts of grains that are in the wash and decreasing the liquid volume. Other things I saw at this part of the tour were the cooker, kettle, and just multiple stills. Stage 5, they talk about the Angel Share, which was mentioned in the theater video. And we could see 5 different barrels that show what happened at year 0, 3, 6, 12, and year 20 of the maturation process. And again, we could see how whiskey's lost by evaporation that takes place during this time. Stage 6 is aging. We get a glimpse into what the cask look like as they sit in the warehouse. Stage 7 is packaging. We could see the staff at this place bottling whiskey at this stage. I saw Four Roses yellow label being bottled during this visit. The automated bottling goes very fast, but there is people still supervising the line, so to speak, making sure that the equipment is running nice and smoothly. And there's doing a little bit of hand work there. I think they're putting on the labels on the, I can't remember. They were doing something by hand. It may have not have been putting on the labels, but it was something. And I did see people doing quality control, like they would go through every few bottles, and if they see something that was amiss, they would pull it off the line. And stage 8 is the ending, where we finished off our tour in the bar with some tastings and visited the souvenir shop. The tastings they offered me were 2 of the same thing tried in different ways. I had a Fuji Sanroku on the rocks first, followed by a Fuji Sanroku highball after. But, of course, having already owned and tried this whiskey, I wasn't complaining to have more of it. Both of those whiskeys came to me in a tumbler glass that had a nice etching or embossing of Mount Fuji in the bottom of the glass that was really cool. And being cheap enough and interesting enough to warrant my purchase, even though I would like to stay away from tumbler glasses, I did in fact buy this glass out of the souvenir shop because of its distinctive look. And how my tour ended, having seen I was really an aficionado about whiskey, they offered me a third drink, which is this one right here, the Fuji Sanroku Signature Blend. I had it neat or straight up, and after this there were more tastings that could be had at a price. It was something along the lines of 2 whiskeys for around 1,700 yen, which is maybe like 15 US dollars, or 4 whiskeys around 2,900 yen, which might be like around 26 US dollars, something like this. And if you're going to participate in those tastings, those additional tastings, or even the regular tastings, where they give you the free samples at the end of the tour, they check to make sure that you're not leaving by car or even by bicycle for that matter. And if you participate in these additional tastings where you have to pay the money, they take you to a second bar area counter where you are separated from the normal patrons where you can drink. And of course I wanted the full experience, so I had the 4 whiskeys. The whole experience for me was nice. The hospitality was great, And as a first distillery visit, I can only judge it against itself. I was glad that I went to that. I felt respected being there, and even if they couldn't cater to me in English 100% of the time, they did their best. All right, again, so at the end of my tour, I was able to taste 5 whiskeys, and these are the 5 that I tasted in this sequence and in this specific order, and I'll tell you about each one. And I tried to have some type of a method to the way that I tried this. The first new whiskey that I tried was a sampling that they gave me of the Fuji Sanroku signature blend. They asked me if I wanted this, and of course, I'm not going to turn it down, so I said yes. So obviously, this was the first one that I tried. And then aside from that, I had to pay for a tasting of the 4 additional whiskeys that followed that. And the way that I did it was I tried to have the youngest one first, and then the, I guess, older and or more expensive one after that one. I was using them as comparables, and I was trying to judge to see whether the older ones taste better than the younger ones that preceded it. And I think it was not always the case that the older ones were better than the younger ones. And, well, no, it's not just that as well, but the way that they presented it to me as well, I tried to have them in order in the way that they presented it to me on the little presentation tray from left to right. They had them arranged in the order that I had just mentioned, from young to old, and then another special one. Anyways, let's go ahead and get on with it. The first whiskey that I tried was the Fuji Sanroku signature blend. Now, this was my absolute first time to ever try this. This was a sample that they gave me prior to me having to purchase the other 5. And when I had this one had a little bit of that caramel and maple smell on the nose that's found in the regular Fuji Sanroku, but there's a little bit of honey smell in this one too. The smell is a little stronger on the nose, and on the tongue is much more powerful too compared to the standard version. On the tongue is just a woof of powerful. The aftertaste is very powerful in the beginning, but it turns to sweetness after. It has the same taste as the smell, and it's a little fruity. Alright, so the second one that I had, but the first one for the purchase whiskeys that I tried, was the single malt whiskey, red wine cask finish, aged 12 years, cask strength. Up until this point in time, after already having the regular Fuji Sanroku on the rocks, the Fuji Sanroku highball, and the Fuji Sanroku signature blend as free tasters at the end of the tour, I thought that this whiskey had the strongest smell out of those 4. It's a bit alcohol-y, cask strength, and very strong on the tongue. The aftertaste, though, is the best part. The red wine cask finished, aged 12 years, is a balance of strength and flavor. So if you like strong, this is the one. The next one I tried was the single malt whiskey, aged 17 years, small batch. This one has the maltiest smell I've smelt yet on a whiskey. It is like smelling mothballs with a hint of floral notes, completely different from the previous 3 whiskeys I tried before it. It's different from any other Japanese whiskey for that matter. It's so strange yet pleasant. Then I added water. The smell was still similar to before. On the tongue was absolutely awful, like alcohol. The aftertaste was a bit like medicine to me. An indescribable taste. Yet something that lingered in the taste was pleasant. but not enough maybe to warrant me to buy or try it again at a ratio of, I consider, 80% bad but maybe 20% pleasant. It was dry. The aftertaste leaned more toward the fruit side than sweet, but had a little bit of both. I think I was sitting at that counter for about an hour conducting this. I wasn't trying to rush it too much. I was trying to really take my time and concentrate on what it was I was doing, and I was writing my notes at the same time. But wow, over that course of an hour, yeah, I started feeling more and more impaired with each sip that I had. So now at this point in time, we have 2 whiskeys left to try. The next one up is the single grain whiskey, aged 25 years small batch. So after the smell of that aged 17 years that I said was like mothballs, this one even tops that one on bad smells. It's like a combination of permanent markers and alcohol wipes. There's nothing pleasant at all about it, and it's definitely a contender for worst smell. The taste is bitter. Nothing sweet about this one. It kind of tastes like a marker too. It's very woody, definitely like grains and wood. Again, like many whiskeys before, the aftertaste is where it's at for this one. That's the payoff. On the tongue, it is not swaying to either the good or bad side, just neutral. Actually, it's not as strong as you'd think. This is just different from everything else. But the smell was definitely the worst part about it. Okay, now we are on the final whiskey that I've tried, which is the Pure Malt Whiskey No Age Statement. Here we go again. This one is almost as bad a smell as the 25. Strong malty smell, but at least not like markers. On the tongue, it is at the crossroads of everything. Strength, malty, some fruit, some sweetness. This is dead in the center of the intersection in terms of flavor, and it's quite nice minus the smell, which isn't much of anything at all. The taste makes it a contender for the best of the 4 I've tried. Better than average. It will make a lasting impression on connoisseurs for sure. Wow, drinking 6 whiskeys in one day, that's a PR, a personal record for me. But what an experience. I enjoyed every bit of it, and that's still not the end of it. I picked up 2 more whiskeys from the distillery, the 2017 Distillers Select Single Malt Whiskey and the 2017 Distillers Single Select Grain Whiskey. And I will conduct my reviews of those 2 new ones which weren't available to try at the distillery, but that I did obtain in an upcoming video. I would like to thank you once again for tuning in of my visit to the Kirin Fuji Gotemba Distillery in Shizuoka Prefecture. And I will see you guys in the next one. As always, make sure you drink responsibly. Salute. Keep it classy.